$5,000. Without sending kids to schools and requiring a certain amount of investment on the time, on the taxpayers' part in order to support those services. So again, I don't think it's wise. And if we tax to the max as far as the shift, again, you're talking about an average commercial industrial property over an $11,000 shift if you're going to go tax to the max. And I don't think anybody's proposing that, but just to show what the actual effect would be. Once again, every year I stand out here, and again, I'm a residential taxpayer, and sure, I'd like a tax break too, but you know, at what cost is it going to go? You know, if you can save me $86, or if you go to 125%, you can save me $172, and again, my home is about the assessed value, the average assessed value, you can save me $172. But my counterpart, who's a commercial industrial tax base and local business people here, who are supporting all of our local charities and our local organizations and the schools and everything else in other ways, if you go to 125%, I'm talking about almost a $6,000 shift to them, because the commercial industrial tax base is so small here, 12 or 13%. It's a huge difference to those businessmen. With the vacancy rates the way that they are, which are, again, significantly high in this particular economic time, as Mr. Carucci pointed out, as a small business owner, you know, the cost of doing business for these people has escalated and increased in the worst economic times. So I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's a good decision. I think maintaining a single tax rate is in everybody's best interest. We're all sharing the burden equally. So I would urge the board members not to shift at this particular time.
Can I ask another question? Is it possible to create a multiple tax rate for commercial, a small business tax rate versus a large business tax rate? Is that something that's feasible?
If
The only thing that you could do is work that shift that they talked about.
Commercial exemption, but it doesn't apply.
But it doesn't apply, so.
So no, it's impossible.
Steve, did you hear that? It's a small commercial exemption, but as Debbie explained, there isn't a property in town
that qualifies.
that would qualify.
Right.
And the current
We couldn't
state,
create a small
the
business
current state
classification.
regulations evidently not.
I would think we'd be able to create a small business classification that has either revenue or employee size that could not shift so much of the burden to the small business owners, but more to some of the larger ones like Paradigm and some of the trucking companies.
Sebastian?
You'd have to get state law changed in order to do that.
State law.
Yeah. We operate on the laws of the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, seeing no further questions, I'm going to close the public hearing and open it for board discussion. I'll go around the table. You have any comments, or?
Yeah, I think, if I may, you look around town, go down 28, and you'll see that there's quite a few vacancies down there at this time. It's very difficult to take a tax split and put it on an area where the revenue is just, what I can see, not there. We don't have any growth at this time. I know shops is coming in.
Right, that's next year.
But that's next year.
2012.
Okay, so, but at least it's
Their
coming.
inventory is in.
But we don't know, they don't have any tenants at this point as of yet, from what I can see, from what I recall hearing. If question 3 had passed, that would have been an impetus to possibly think about doing a split tax, because that would have created more revenue. Businesses would have been starting to reduce their tax base or their tax costs and so on. So under those circumstances, I probably would have supported a split in the tax rate. But at this time, the economy, it's hurting everybody. It's obviously hurting not only me, but all the residents in town, but it's also hurting the businesses as well. I didn't think it was a good idea to do the meals tax, because that was just another burden to bear. So I think at this time, I would not consider a split tax, even though if the economy were to turn around, looking at next year, I know this was said last year, if the economy turns around, I would consider it a split tax in better economic times. Put that now.
My turn?
Your turn, if you want a turn.
I'll take a turn, sure. My position hasn't changed from last year. A couple of years ago, I had a different mindset, but my position last year was it wasn't the right economic time to have a split tax rate, and that's my position again this year. I think to Mr. Carucci's point as to how we do business in town, we're going to have to address that very soon. This board proposed something at town meeting that wasn't accepted by town meeting, and I accept that. But in terms of your health insurance cost, that's what we're feeling here in town too, and that's an impact that's considerable. And that's where we have to make change, and that's what this board's gonna be facing in the very near future. But in terms of split tax rate, economic times, don't call for it. I agree with Mr. O'Leary. In the future, the economic times are better, commercial vacancies decreased considerably, we're able to bring in wastewater. After all those things happen, at that time, I probably will reconsider my opinion on a split tax rate. But presently, no, I'm for a single tax rate. I wish I could give relief to the residential homeowner, but state law doesn't allow for it. And I agree with Mr. Brandano. Well, residential homeowners can't continue to feel the impact that they've had. We need to look to the state government to give us relief locally. Because when I open the transcript week to week and I see the notices of foreclosures in there, they're considerable. There are on average 3 a week that are in there. People are losing homes. They can't continue to pay their taxes. People are losing jobs. But it's a solution, unfortunately, that can't be done here. It has to be done at Beacon Hill. That's where it has to come from.
Well, being the newest board member, I didn't have the privilege of going through this last year, but I would admit if I was on the board last year, I wouldn't agree on a split tax rate. The economy was, I think, a little more severe than it is now. I'm a business owner, I own a couple of them, and I know how the business community feels, but I'm also a selectman in a town where 87.5% of the people pay the bill, and you have to take that into account. I'm not a big fan of the CIP. I think you've gotten that from me. You can get the sense from me, from my questions. I think it's wrong the way we do CIP. I think it's wrong to our residents the way it is. We should have one way we assess value for residential and commercial, and then we're all in the same. Since we have one rate, then we should assess the same way. Then we're all in it together. But to have it split, I think it's unfair. And I know the business community disagrees with me. Well, if I was on their side, I would disagree too. But they have benefits that our residents, 87.5%, that they don't get. Okay, there's tax deductible expenses they get from the federal and state, which we don't get. When they have changes in their businesses and they have people that that fold up in their properties and they can't rent them at the time, again, they at least have an opportunity to come to you and submit that paperwork to you to show the reductions that they had in their revenues. Where we have residents that lose their jobs, and they don't have that opportunity to come back here and say, I've lost my job, and here we are, we're going to take a rate now and increase it again. Okay, so it doesn't take into account where they have that opportunity. I'm not saying they may get any relief, they may and they may not. And the way I'm reading this from this year versus last year, the commercial is getting some relief, because their assessment went down. Okay? 2%. 2%. And you know what? I do believe Mr. Brandano speaks on the majority of the people in this town. I really do. So I appreciate, and I know how hard it is for you to stand up here and say those things, and embarrassing things about him losing his job. That's a family matter. But I think we have to face the realities. And we have a strategic plan that we all have been talking about. And Mr. O'Leary just stood up and said we need to make major investments in our infrastructure. I agree with you. But we're not going to do it by going to the taxpayers in the next year when we need to get an override for a new school that we're spending lots of time and energy on, which has 100% of my support. But how are we supposed to do that when we're going to raise the residential tax rate now? I think we should have a serious discussion about having a split tax rate right here, right now. If we really want to achieve building a new school in this town. If we want to have wastewater, where's that money going to come from? Some one of those, or both of them, are going to have to come from some form of an override. So let's face reality. Let's give relief to that 87.5%, so we have a heck of a shot, at least some, maybe even an inkling of a shot of getting something passed to be successful in meeting something in our strategic plan. You know, and I know for a fact that wastewater is a major, major solution for this town. I know it will work. And so, but I'm afraid it may not get passed because we're not going to get the money we need to do our job. So consider making a small shift now in the tax rate. So we give us some relief to the 87.5%, so when we bring an override next year for our wastewater, we can get it approved. I know that that's not gonna be a big fan from the business community, but you get some tax benefits we don't. The residents don't. So have some consideration for it, and then that's where I stand.
Thank you, Mike. I think that, you know, we're in a box. And I guess we can bang against one side of the box or the other. The bottom line is that the volume of the box isn't gonna change the amount of revenue that we're gonna receive, you know, short of an override, doesn't change. And right now, we have a lot of vacant commercial space. And I think it would be wrong to raise the commercial rate this year or even in the near future. I think we should be working hard to increase our commercial base. And one way of doing it is to attract businesses in here. And by not having a split tax rate, that's one benefit the town has in terms of attracting businesses. We have to bring wastewater in to increase the value of our commercial properties in certain areas, and we have to move that forward. And the big burden of paying for that is gonna fall on those commercial property owners where we put in the wastewater. So I think that at this point and in the foreseeable future, it's not advisable to raise the commercial, go to a split tax rate. There's no real benefit to the local taxpayers from the point of view of the burden. You know, using simple figures, it's not quite 10 to 1, but what it means is every dollar a homeowner saves, on average home, the average business is paying an extra $10 in taxes. And you know, at this point, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think we should keep it where it is. We were successful in getting business, large business, on Concord Street. Wilmington got the parking lot primarily because we had a flat tax rate. And I'll be supporting that for the next few years until we get to a point where it makes sense, both economically and when we get to a point where we've filled up our vacant commercial property, we have wastewater in place, then I think it'll make a lot of sense. When businesses are thriving and they can afford it, you know, then I think that makes more sense. I think that, you know, something Steve mentioned that we can't forget is that, you know, when we look at our budgets and we look at the programs that are going on, mostly for our youth and some of our elderly, are coming from donations and programs sponsored by our business community. And they are, at least in my opinion, doing their share. So with that, I will call for a motion based on the consensus of the board, which is, you don't want to read it, Mr. Bristow?
Of course I want to read it.
Okay.
Well, somehow, I'm not that
Just
bad.
checking, okay.
We set this one first?
What?
We set the levy first, right?
Yeah, we have to set the levy, I guess. We have to go through the
Do you have a
process.
particular order you want me to read them in? I
Oh,
don't
I'm
have a
sorry,
number.
no.
We've always
it is.
done the rate,
Classification first.
1.0 was split rate.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's take them in that order.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I move to establish a tax classification factor of 1.0.
Second.